Term life insurance tips you should know. This is Tom, and we're going to talk term life insurance today. Just a little bit of education and tips to help people understand what is term life insurance and what kind of things should you know if you're thinking about shopping for a term life insurance policy. Term life insurance. What is it? What is it? What does it mean? And what key things should you know about it before you buy it? There's other types of life insurance. We won't get into those today. It will just confuse things. Mainly the other name insurance policy is whole life insurance. Term is the simplest kind of life insurance. We're going to talk about that today. This is the LFI channel. Hit the subscribe button if you would, please. We'd really appreciate it. And if this content's helpful to you, follow us on the channel. Thank you. Just a quick disclaimer. You can read this over. We're an educational channel. We're not giving legal, financial, or any kind of professional advice. It's purely for entertainment and general education, just to help people learn terminology, background, where you might go look to find out more about these kind of topics that we find a lot of people encounter, but they don't understand well, and that causes them to be confused and put off even looking at things like these kinds of topics in life because it just seems overwhelming or confusing. So we're going to try to clear some of that up. Always seek a licensed professional in your area. That would be financial advisor, your CPA, an attorney, an estate planner, to take the next step after watching something like this and thinking, maybe this is something I need to do or my family needs to do. Always consult a professional. So why might a person want to buy life insurance, need life insurance? Really, first we'll just say, what is life insurance? Life insurance is purchasing a policy, much like you have an auto insurance policy or a homeowner's insurance policy, the kind of insurance most people know about. But in this case, it's insuring your life. If something were to happen to you, if you were to pass away for any reason, an accident, a medical condition, that you have a certain amount of insurance based on your life, and you can designate who to leave that amount of money to. So you're basically, pre-planning ahead in case something were to happen to you. And we'll talk more about who these people are that you can leave the insurance to and why you might want to do this. Some of the reasons. You've started a family perhaps, and you want to provide for them in the event that you pass away unexpectedly. This is probably the number one reason people start thinking about life insurance. When you're 18 or 20 years old or under 25, whatever it might be, you don't think about these kind of things because it's just you're a young person, it's just you by yourself usually. You're like, what would I buy life insurance for? You get a little older, you start to have a family, you have your spouse or significant other, you now start maybe having children, and you start thinking, if something were to happen to me, how would my significant other pay the bills, or would my children be able to go to college in the future perhaps, because I'm not going to be around to earn any money anymore. I'm deceased, unfortunately. Something happened. I got in an accident, I got sick, and I died much younger than I planned. Life is very fragile. Life is very unexpected a lot of the time, and these are hard topics to talk about. Most people, that's a lot of time why they procrastinate. They don't like to talk about life insurance. They consider it kind of odd or weird because you're thinking about, well, what if I, die or pass away, obviously. But it's a part of a good estate plan, and a part of what most professionals would tell you is part of a good estate plan, because you're thinking of the future and you're thinking of loved ones most of the time. That's the exact reason why life insurance exists. You're perhaps starting to accumulate more assets and wealth in life, and again, you don't want to leave a spouse or a partner or kids stuck with no money because all of a sudden you're gone and now the household income is cut in half, or perhaps even more if you're the one that makes more of the money. Could be either the husband or the wife. and there may be bills to pay. Now, we're not a debtor nation. When you pass away, certain of your bills, pass away with you, but certain other ones you may be in holding assets in joint title. You own your home with your husband or wife, and it has a mortgage, let's say. This would be a very common reason to start looking at life insurance. Is you would say, well, if something happened to either one of us, would sure be nice to be able to pay off. We've been paying on the house 15 years. It'd sure be nice to have enough money there to pay the house off, so the other person who remains and is going to take care of the children, let's say, has enough to perhaps pay off the mortgage, and maybe even some left over to help them with expenses, and maybe perhaps enough even to put the kids through college. It's those kind of things. That's the way you want to start thinking. When you're doing these kinds of things, it's probably, I'm a pad and paper kind of person. Get the piece of paper out and a pen, and you sit down and you start to write down a lot of what is being taught in this lesson here, and doodling out your own ideas about what do I think I need this for, and talk to your significant other or advisors, and start to think, yeah, this is really something we should do, and here's the kind of things we would want to do and have ready if we were to do a life insurance policy. I just talked about number 3, basically. You own a home, you still have a mortgage, and you would like to be able to leave that home what we would call free and clear, right? Paid for, as if you paid cash for it, that there would be no more mortgage if you were to suddenly be gone, and so that your significant other, your children, people, whoever that's important in your life might be able to inherit this asset and have the ability to pay off probably the biggest bill that anybody ever has in life, right? The mortgage. That's a big one. And then there's numerous other estate planning reasons why one might start to consider life insurance. You see it in industries like Hollywood, for instance. If you're famous and you're making a lot of money for a movie studio, for instance, and you're worth a lot of money, they may even take out an insurance policy on your life, because if something happens to one of these super valuable actors or actresses, it can literally change the whole outcome of the movie studio's future business. It's also true sometimes for CEOs, in charge of big companies. On an individual level, it varies for so many reasons. You have to look at your own life and your own situation and start to think about, would it make sense, for our family, or husband, wife, children, all the things we just talked about. It's an individual decision, but think about it and start thinking of the reasons and laying out a plan. That's the most important part, is just to start. Most people will procrastinate on this one. They just don't like to talk about life insurance. Consult a licensed insurance broker or estate planner or lawyer in your state for expert advice, of course. If you get past the stage where you're ready to start shopping for a policy, or you want that policy reviewed to fully understand what you're getting into, always go to an expert. Most of these issues, like insurance, they're regulated state by state. So in the United States, 50 states, buying a policy in one state is perhaps different than buying a policy in another state. What the term life insurance policy does is generally pretty much always the same, but there's just different conditions sometimes per state. Just know that insurance is not something that's kind of universal across, East Coast to West Coast, North to South. It's an individual state. Each state has an insurance commission and rules and laws. So just be aware of that also, depending on where you live. So what is exactly, we've said this thing, term life insurance. It's a particular type of policy. What does it mean? Well, the name being term, that's our first hint. Bingo. Actually, the name is the key to the puzzle. It's the clue. So term, when applied to a life insurance policy, just means essentially a fixed amount of time in years. That's it. That's the key. So if you know and see that you're shopping or looking at term life insurance policy, it's a very specific kind of policy. It's a fixed amount of time policy. And then we're going to explain that a little bit here. So most of the common term policies are typically, my experience, shopping for them personally, and in family and friends, would be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. There's very other lengths of terms available, but those are common ones. You'll see that the term of the policy runs for 10 years. It might run for 15 years or 20 years. The longer the term gets, it obviously gets usually more expensive on the annual premium, because the insurance company, what they're doing is they're saying, if you buy this policy, we guarantee that for the next 10 years or the next 15 years or the next 20 years, whatever you choose, that whatever premium, whatever annual payment we tell you today, then it's locked in for that number of years. So obviously the longer they insure you, let's say 20 years versus 10, they're at a higher risk that you could pass away, and then they would have to pay the amount of the policy, so they increase the annual premium. And again, this would be something to discuss with an advisor. Term life insurance in general is the simplest and most affordable. It's surprisingly affordable. I think most people overlook that, and that's another reason if they've never investigated term insurance, they think, well, an insurance policy must be hugely expensive, and it's just not something I'm going to spend money on. I don't know. I don't want to do it, or like I said, they don't want to talk about life insurance, and they just kind of procrastinate and keep putting it off. The longer you wait, you might have been able to lock in a lower rate for a longer term when you're younger and healthier. The older you get, and the chance you have more health issues and so forth, it could be more expensive to buy the same policy you could have bought, just 5 years ago, for example. You don't want to buy it too early. Like I said, if you're 20, 25, nothing going on in life, you don't own much of anything, you're not in a relationship or all those things we just talked about, term insurance, life insurance, those kind of things are probably not for you yet. But there's a point in life you're going to hit where you say, you know what, I think this is something that should be looked at. So some of the common terminology, when you start, most of this is online nowadays. In the old days, you had to, if you're old enough to remember, like me, I'm an old guy, sort of, you went to the yellow pages, or you went down the street and there was a local insurance broker, and everybody knew in the neighborhood or the area kind of who the 3 or 4, and they're big names, you would recognize them, insurance companies, and then there was your insurance person, you'd go there, and that's where your life insurance policy purchase probably would have taken place. Nowadays there's a whole bunch of ways to shop and compare and look at numerous types of insurance products, and term life being a big one. Lots of websites, and the beauty of that is it's become more competitive. You can look at all the different term lengths, as I stated, 10 years, 15, 20, who's got competitive pricing. You can look at the company's strength, how long they've been around. Are they a 100-year-old company? We know they're going to be around to pay the policy, versus Joe's Insurance, and you're like, I don't know who those guys are. Well, I don't know if I would buy a policy with them then. Most of these time you want to buy with a large, established, very financially stable company, and these online sites will give you all that. They'll rank these companies, they'll rank the pricing, they'll help you compare policies. So some of the terms, if you're going to go through that process, we'll start with most likely the common term would be the payout amount. That pad and paper thing I talked about. Let's say you've decided that in your situation, I think I want $250,000 of life insurance on a term policy, or I want $500,000 worth. So that would be one, the payout amount. You're gonna be the insured. The person who buys the policy is the insured. who would get the money if, again, unfortunately you were to pass away for any reason. Those would be called your beneficiaries. Could be your wife, could be your husband, could be your significant other, could be your children. It could really be anybody you want to name and leave it to. It could be a brother, a sister, a friend, a really dear friend. But that would be the beneficiary. Who receives the policy if I die? And most policies, you can name more than one beneficiary. You could say, child A gets 50% and child B gets 50%. Any kind of combination like that. You always want to look at restrictions, and that's a big one. Always read carefully, especially during the comparing process. Are there specific restrictions on the policy? And the other word that goes usually on that same kind of line is exclusions. Certain insurance companies are not going to insure certain people or certain backgrounds that are what they would consider high risk or just a market they don't want to be in. I just put on here as an example, do you race cars as a hobby? You need to know if your policy excludes that or will cover it, as just one example. The insurance company has a right to insure anybody they want for any reason they want, and also similarly then to exclude anybody. If you're a parachute jumping, mountain climbing, motorbike racing, car racing, combination, all the above, some insurance companies are going to say nah, or they may be willing to take out a policy on you, but the insurance premium is going to be a whole heck of a lot different than your just kind of average, hey, I have a job, I live in a home here in town, and that's pretty much what I do. I go on a vacation every once in a while with my family. I'm not engaged in any high-risk activities. Another big one then, when you fill out, eventually, if you do decide to purchase a policy, always be honest in every question they ask. Never, ever forge or be even half-truth on an insurance policy, because if, unfortunately, again, you were to pass away and this policy is going to pay out and they find out anything on that policy was falsified, let's say you were a heavy smoker and you said, no, I'm a non-smoker, and they have, reason that where via medical records or who knows, how these large companies, they have a lot of ways to cross-check things, then if that policy was fraudulently filled out, they may not pay out on that policy. That's, again, something to talk to an expert about. But these are the kind of things to be aware of and just make sure you fully understand. And then last bullet point there, the annual premium. So when you're sitting down, you're going on a pad of paper and you're talking to your significant other, or you're starting to talk to your planner about this. How much do I think I can afford each year? It's usually an annual premium on life insurance. You pay once a year. So you have to come up with, you can say, I can afford $300 a year, or I can afford $400 a year, or $500, or who knows. It has to be in your budget. So, again, people may procrastinate, well, I don't want an insurance policy, Bill, it's not worth it. And you're like, well, what if something happens to you? Is your child's future college education perhaps worth the $400 a year, which divided by 12 might be $300 or $30, $35 a month, something like that, let's say. That's a couple hamburgers. That's maybe foregoing a couple lattes. So to guarantee that there's money there in the future for something as important as, say, their college education or whatever reason you decide in life, you have to decide, like, $300 a year or $400 a year, and these are realistic numbers for some of the policies that are, when I've seen online, decent sized policies, maybe $250,000 in insurance, which is not that much. It's surprisingly affordable, and I think a lot of people just overlook that, that just cut one or two little expenses a month. Just don't go out to eat the fast food once or twice a month, and you bought yourself a life insurance policy for your loved ones. So how to pick the term length? That's one of the big ones. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What would affect that? So the bullet point, now that we know the term means years, what do you pick? And again, this is where it's a lot of sitting down with you and your significant others, your advisors, people you trust, maybe family, and then also a professional, maybe the broker who sells insurance, or CPA, again, an estate planner, especially you're good at these kind of things. Many factors will be considered. Most important, in my opinion, which is just an amateur opinion, but when I shopped and did this, your present age, how much it'll cost, how long do you want to protect those in your family in the event that you would pass away unexpectedly. And again, to remember that the longer the term, usually the more expensive. So an example would be you're 30 years old and you've got that mortgage and it's going to be around for a while. You may want to think like, I need a 20-year policy would really be great, because that gets me all the way being covered to 50 years old. And by that time, the mortgage is much closer to being paid off. My spouse or the significant other is closer to Social Security, a lot closer. Versus, let's say you're 45, a 15-year policy might be fine, because you're going to say, well, that would get us to 60 years old if I were to pass away within the 15-year term. And by that time, my significant other is almost ready to start collecting Social Security. The mortgage would already be paid off, because we can see how fast we're paying down the mortgage. It's all those kinds of things. The kids would be already fully grown, perhaps, and through college by that time period. So you have to kind of draw a timeline, a graph of your own life, your own personal situation, and decide, what makes sense to me to cover what period of time. The older you get, usually the shorter the period of time you would cover. If it's not unusual for a 50-year-old to buy life insurance. They might buy a 10-year policy. They might say, look, I just want to cover until I'm 60, because again, by that point, my significant other or whoever I'm going to leave this money to if I were to pass away is already paid off on the house, or they're already close to Social Security, or they're already, the children are already through college. Again, I don't need as long a coverage. So those are the types of things. And it's very personal. You have to decide on each individual case by case. Last bullet point, always go back then. Consult estate planner, lawyer, expert, friend, insurance broker, anybody that you think can help. And it's just a personal decision. It's not hard. Like I said, the paper and pencil at the kitchen table with the significant other, and just start weighing out all your options. How old are each of you? Sometimes one spouse is older. It's not unusual, right? You could have a marriage where people are 10 years age difference. So who's being insured, the older one or the younger one? Those type of things. You have to kind of draw out a timeline and then figure out, again, with that fixed term, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is we lock in, if we were to buy a term policy, what are we trying to cover and for how long and for what reasons? So what would a typical policy, if you start looking at these online sites, and that's kind of what the whole purpose of this training video is so you could just start getting into the process. Don't procrastinate any longer. You're going to know the basics after watching this. Start going, just Google term life insurance, and you're going to get all kinds of sites, and especially comparison shopping sites. You'll probably see a lot of the sites of the major big name insurers, and then they would say, if you're interested in term life insurance, click here, and you can get roughly price estimates. Remember, everything on the initial search will be price estimates. An example, they're going to say a 15-year term life insurance policy for a 30 to 35-year-old male in good health, versus there's bad health, good health, excellent health. Those things are relative. In the end, most of these policies, they're going to want you to, not even want you, they're going to actually require you to take a basic health exam, where they send you to a qualified physician in your area, and they're really looking at the basic things. They're going to do a blood test. They want to know cholesterol. They want to know your weight. Again, are you a smoker, non-smoker? Have a doctor kind of look at your overall health. But reading that last bottom line, so a typical thing you will see when you start searching would be something like $200,000 face value. That's the amount of the policy. If I were to pass away, they're saying we would pay $200,000 to whoever you designate. 15-year fixed term. That means that for 15 years, whatever they quote you, let's say they quote you $300 a year is your premium, then you're locked in for the next 15 years if you buy that policy after they qualify you through that medical exam. And they're going to tell you right up front, this particular section of policies you're searching on are for non-smokers, males, and believe it or not, the tables are different for males and females because different people live longer, males and females, so the insurance companies tend to price them different. So probably one of the first boxes you click, are you a male or a female, believe it or not, and then you get into the age, are you between 30 or 35, then the good health, maybe poor health, I don't know, I have diabetes or some known issue. All those things will affect that initial guesstimate that they're going to give you on a shopping website. And of course they won't quote a fixed exact amount until usually the health exam. Now, one thing to note here, there are some no health exam term life policies available on the market. They're out there now, which means these companies are willing to sell you a term life insurance policy without having to have you go in for any kind of medical exam. The issue is they're going to be more expensive, sometimes much more, because the risk to the insurance company is a lot higher. They're basically going to go just off your age and some basic information that you type in. But some people, if they're a phobia about having a health exam, or they just don't want one, or any other reasons, they may say, I like this idea of a no health exam, simple application policy, and they do exist, so be aware that you can search for those also. But the policy's premium will be considerably higher per my experience when I've shopped for them. Sometimes like twice as much. Let's say you could get a $300 policy if you go through the health exam process, a basic physical essentially. Might go to $600. They would quote you just based on a no health exam policy and you inputting just general information, your age, where you live, are you taking any medications right now, what's your weight and height, and again, you don't falsify any of that information. But based on that, then they're gonna quote, okay, for that we would insure you for $800 or something. Okay, so that's kind of what it's going to look like. And as you start looking, you'll get more and more familiar with what the terminology looks like and what the shopping process looks like. And it's not hard. Down at the bottom, stay cool. Don't panic. It's not that complicated. Most people I know, family, friends, they procrastinate on this. And tragically, I've actually seen situations close to the family where someone passes away, no life insurance policy, and the significant other is left, unfortunately, in a real bind. They don't make as much money. They've lost, of course, one of the incomes in the family now. They've got the couple of kids. They're still, the children are still fairly young. They've got a mortgage. They've got bills to pay. And now it's like, what the heck do I do? Whereas if there was a life insurance policy there, some of the things we discussed, they could have paid off the house. They could have already had a bank account sitting there with money for the kids' future needs and college expenses, perhaps, paid by the life insurance policy. So don't procrastinate. I've literally seen it happen, and the person is just devastated, whoever, the one that's left behind. And very unexpected, somehow the spouse passed away. It could be a car accident, it could be anything. They got an illness and passed away very quickly and just left in shock, and it's terrible. And I've seen it happen more than once with people that I know directly. So it's important to talk to about these things. Again, life insurance, some people, it's just kind of creepy to them because you're talking about what if I pass away in the future. But it's part of life, and it's we live in a world where things cost money, and especially if you have the things we're talking about, a home and children and expenses. This is just a tool and part of planning, like you plan everything else in your life. So don't procrastinate and don't panic. And it looks overwhelming at first, but anybody can learn to do this, and there's people out there to help, advisors. And again, if you're at a certain age and a point in life, if it's even come up in conversation with your significant other or people in the family have said, hey, I've got life insurance through my work, do you have a policy? And you look at them and you say, no, actually nothing, Maybe that's the clue that it's time to start looking. So let's keep it simple, kind of recap here. You're shopping for a term policy based on what we're talking about here today. Again, there's other types of insurance, but this is about term life insurance. The length in the policy is the term, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Again, there's other numbers besides those. Those are very common ones you'll see. You're shopping for an amount of insurance that you believe, see, this is personal, that you believe, and how you decide between you, family, again, husband, wife, your financial advisor. Do I need 100,000, 100K means 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, $500,000 policy. That's not unusual on the market. You start getting up for people who have more assets and bigger homes. Or even a $1 million policy is not that far-fetched at all in today's world to purchase a $1 million life insurance policy. You have a budget, how much you think you can afford for the policy annual premium. Obviously, the bigger the policy, the 100,000 versus a $500,000. Well, the $500,000 policy is obviously going to cost more because if the insurance company ends up having to pay that amount, it costs them a lot more money. And again, the longer the term. If they lock in a 10-year policy, it's one price. If they quote the exact same insurance but for 20 years, the same amount, let's say 500,000, then 20 years is going to cost longer because they're guaranteeing you a flat premium, that $400 or $300 a year, whatever it turns out to be, that it won't change for the entire length of the 20-year term. So they're projecting further into the future, which means more risk for them. They have to increase the price then. Just be aware of that. So what's your budget? You have to come up with a number that you feel comfortable with. And again, in my personal experience, and a real reasonable amount, $300, $400, $500 a year, a policy that to protect my significant other and some family, was the amount of money that I could cut a couple hamburgers a month, or skip some kind of simple spending a month, and you could have enough $30 or $40 a month, and that's a life insurance premium right there on a term policy. It's not outrageous amounts of money. It's surprisingly affordable, in my opinion. That's really about it. So the name of the game is to start shopping and stop putting it off into the future. Again, I've personally had family tragedies I've seen where this happened, and it had come up in their life. They had talked about, I should probably look at getting life insurance. I should probably look at getting life insurance. Right up until something happened. And again, the other person was left in life, most of the time with children. Those are the ones I'm most familiar with. And they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. The income is way down. We've got a house I'm going to probably have to sell and everything. I've got the kids, and boy, we should have got that life insurance policy. Again, consult advisors. People you trust, an estate planner. You might have a lawyer, a CPA. The insurance people themselves, broker agents, are very good at explaining these things. Trusted family member. A lot of time you have people in the family that are really good at this kind of stuff. They're experienced. They've bought life insurance. They've done this before. They could sit down with that pad and paper and help you work through it. But the main thing, like the old sports shoe slogan, just do it. as most people will procrastinate and never think of it or act until it's too late. If something happens, it's already too late. So it's time to start. If you've already even slightly thought about this topic, then that's probably the hint that you need to start looking at it. So the recap: act now. The little guy up in the corner, right? Do it. Just do it. Get going on it. Purchasing a term life insurance policy, it's affordable. In my opinion, again, I see people spend more on a cell phone bill, more on some coffees per month, and yet they never think about protecting their loved ones with life insurance and estate planning process. It's just odd, to me, how something so simple gets put off as if it's really complicated and would cost too much, but they would think nothing of dropping $20-30 a month, which could be the policy premium, on something trivial. Term policies can be surprisingly affordable. Again, $300, $400, $500 a year. That's per year, just 1 year premium each year. You usually pay them once a year on life insurance. That's not a lot of money, really, when you look at the potential that it could pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars or more to whoever you want to leave it to, if you were to unfortunately pass away. With sometimes a moment's notice, an accident, sometimes a sudden health condition, and you're leaving behind your loved ones. And my experience is most people procrastinate and put off buying a policy. They wait too long, and again, I've seen the terrible outcomes of that. It's very unfortunate. Some people are lucky that through their work they usually sometimes have at least a basic policy, let's say $100,000 policy that's built into their employment. Usually that would be like professionals, I don't know, engineers, people who work at large companies, programmers, software, Google, those kind of people offer probably some kind of base life insurance. And usually what they do is then they say, if you want to increase the amount, you can pay X amount, it'll be taken out of your paycheck, and you could double, triple the amount of that, whatever. Those are really good plans. So also look into your work. That's a point I kind of missed. Look into your workplace. You might already have access to a policy and not even be aware of it. So if you could purchase it through work, it's probably also going to be a very good deal, because they're buying at a discount, most likely because of the company being able to buy numerous policies for numerous employees, so they'd probably get a very good rate. Lastly, don't be scared of the terminology. It's really not that complicated. I kind of just went over the basics, and you can do it. That's about it. Thank you for watching the channel. Again, hit the subscribe if you found any of this helpful. We're going to start posting videos on a regular basis, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And thank you for watching.